For years, conservatives have complained about American universities.
You have to be on the lookout for inappropriate curriculum.
Seems to me that staff at diversity, equity, and inclusion departments on many college campuses today are noticeably anti-Semitic.
There's a great rot on these campuses. They've become very woke.
Here's future Vice President J.D. Vance at the National Conservatism Conference in 2021, back when he was running for Senate.
If any of us want to do the things that we want to do for our country and for the people who live in it, we have to honestly and aggressively attack the universities in this country.
President Donald Trump spoke about this explicitly on the campaign trail in 2024.
The time has come to reclaim our once great educational institutions from the radical left, and we will do that.
Now the Trump administration has created a way to try and force universities to make the changes conservatives want to see. And that is mostly because of an internal government group, the Task Force to Combat Anti-Semitism.
We've talked to dozens of people, both inside the administration and out, and concluded that in reality, much of the task force work, its thinking, its demands have gone well beyond anti-Semitism to really attack universities for a liberal point of view, including DEI and other types of things that rub the Trump administration decidedly the wrong way.
From the newsroom of The Washington Post, this is Post Reports. I'm Colby Ickowitz. It's Wednesday, July 23rd. Today, education reporter Laura Meckler unpacks a Post investigation into how the Trump administration is using anti-Semitism as a vehicle to push its conservative agenda and drastically alter how American universities are run. Laura, hello. Thanks for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
So, Laura, let's go back to the beginning. How exactly did this task force, how did it come to be?
So this is all in response to the Israel-Gaza war, which, of course, started at the end of 2023. And there were many pro-Palestinian protests on college campuses. There was concern, first under the Biden administration and then definitely under the Trump administration, about some anti-Semitic sentiments that were growing out of these protests, as well as some actions. And the Trump administration really wanted to crack down on this, and they created this anti-Semitism task force in February of this year. And they said that the whole point was to make sure that colleges were doing what they were supposed to do under federal law to protect Jewish students.
The idea really was to kind of root out anti-Semitism on college campuses.
To root out and also make sure that people who were guilty of it were being appropriately punished, that the universities were putting in systems and enforcing those systems, and that they were addressing incidents when they came up.
So this was created at the beginning of the year. So has it actually worked towards those goals?
To some extent, yes. A lot of it revolves around how universities deal with protests on campus. There was, of course, a lot of dispute around whether universities were appropriately responding to protesters, especially when protesters, say, set up encampments and refused to leave, even though maybe they didn't have a permit for it or they didn't have any kind of permission to be there at all. So the Trump administration is asking universities, in some cases demanding that universities have better enforcement of their policies, that they maybe ban masks. Sometimes protesters wear masks so people won't know who they are, or even make changes to academic departments that say deal with the Middle East and in cases where the administration feels that the department is biased against Israel. But it has also done a lot more than that. Really, it's become a vehicle to go after universities in a much more wholesale way. We heard at the top of the show from J.D. Vance and from President Trump as they were talking about their concerns broadly about universities. And these are longstanding conservative complaints. And now the administration is really going right at that in quite an aggressive way. But we also should say that they're going at it in an inconsistent way. So, for instance, they sent warning letters to 60 universities telling them that they might be in violation of federal law and essentially saying, you better get your act together. But we reached out to all 60 universities, and more than a third of them have not heard another word. It's been months since that letter was sent. Similarly, they told 10 universities that they were going to come and visit and interview a whole bunch of people on campus, do a big investigation about their handling of anti-Semitism on campus. And at least 4 of those universities have yet to hear any follow-up and haven't had any visits. The other 6 didn't tell us what had happened there, but at least 4 of them haven't had any. So it's really been quite inconsistent.
So then what is the central case that the administration is making in these letters?
So what they're saying is that universities need to abide by Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, which says that any institution, including universities that receive federal funding, cannot discriminate on the basis of race, color, or national origin. National origin includes a shared national ancestry, such as a Jewish heritage.
Okay.
So it's not so much discriminating on the basis of religion per se, it's discrimination on the basis of a shared Jewish ancestry. So these are what the warning letters say, is basically you better not be allowing anti-Semitism or discrimination against Jewish students to persist on your school.
So there's been all of these schools that have gotten letters about this, but then there are like specific schools that have been really targeted by the Trump administration, right?
They've really gone after Columbia University and Harvard University. And in the demands that they've made to these schools, they go well beyond anti-Semitism. They include things like you have to change the way you hire people. You cannot consider race in your hiring process. You don't have enough ideological diversity. We want to audit every department, the faculty, the staff, the students, and every part of your university to be sure there's ideological balance. And they've threatened a variety of schools that they're going to pull or freeze federal funding. And in some cases, they have already frozen that funding, including for Columbia and Harvard universities. These are things that don't relate to anti-Semitism, but do relate to this larger conservative campaign against both diversity, equity, and inclusion, and more broadly, against sort of the liberal worldview that a lot of universities have and that they are very much against.
But so, Laura, are they doing all of this under the guise of the anti-Semitism task force? Because you have this anti-Semitism task force, but you're saying they're pressuring schools to end DEI initiatives. Those seem like those are two different priorities.
And they're getting very much intermeshed together. Yes, a lot of this is being done by the task force itself. And you know, the reasoning on the part of the administration, we asked them about this, and they're like, yeah, we're going after all of this. It's all related. Sort of like, well, how is this related?
Right.
And they say that anti-Semitism and DEI are both racist. They have the same racist roots. Now, that, of course, is a assertion that many would disagree with, but that is what they say.
So let me try to wrap my head around that. So they're saying that DEI programs and initiatives in and of themselves are racist, but isn't the point of DEI to not be racist?
This is one of the abiding things to get your head around in the Trump administration. They, in fact, argue that DEI in and of itself is racist because what those initiatives do is consider race. They think about race. They analyze the world through the lens of race. And they say, for instance, are there certain groups, certain racial groups that are not represented well, that are not feeling included, they're not having equal opportunities? That's what DEI is all about.
Right.
And they're saying, well, if you're looking at it through the lens of race, that's racist. You're not supposed to be considering race in any of this. You're supposed to be treating everybody equally. So that's where it kind of gets flipped on its head. And the way this all kind of connects up with anti-Semitism is they would say that DEI divides the world into oppressors and oppressed. Well, no, this is not all that DEI does.
Okay.
In this formulation, what we have is that there's the people who are sort of the people in charge, and then there are the people being victimized. And Jews are being put in the group of oppressors. The criticism of Israel on behalf of the pro-Palestinian protesters very much is that Israel is the bad guy. They are the oppressors. They are oppressing the Palestinian people. That links up with DEI from a conservative point of view, is that, oh, Jews are in the category of oppressors, and that's offensive, and that's anti-Semitic.
I see. And so what do critics of that way of thinking say? Like, what is the pushback to the administration kind of lumping in anti-Semitism and DEI as one mission?
Well, they would say that these are two completely different things. And there's a lot of people who will defend DEI initiatives as working to try to make sure everybody has a voice, everybody feels included, everybody's represented, that diversity is a strength, and that all of those are good things. You don't find many people defending anti-Semitism per se. Even universities will say that we are also concerned about anti-Semitism and we're trying to make sure it doesn't happen. Now, of course, there are some people who would say that the administration is calling things out as anti-Semitic that aren't really anti-Semitic. They're just free speech, and that is critical of the state of Israel, and they would say for good reason.
So who exactly in the administration is behind this task force? Who's like making these decisions and pushing for this agenda?
The members of the task force, the leaders of the task force, are senior administration officials from the Education Department, the Department of Health and Human Services, which controls a lot of money for universities through the National Institutes for Health, and the General Services Administration, which sort of manages contracts. So you've got these senior officials, mostly people that most people have never heard of. And then you've got this guy at the Justice Department named Leo Terrell, who is sort of the public face. He's a Black civil rights attorney who recently was a Fox News contributor. Before that, many years ago, he was a Democrat. He's converted and now is all in on Trump. Here he is speaking on Fox News.
The academic system in this country has been hijacked by the left, has been hijacked by the Marxists. They have controlled the mindset of our young people, and they haven't stopped there. They're going to the schools, the public schools, K to 12. And we have to put an end to it. We have to seek injunctive relief. We have to stop these practices.
He is out there talking a lot about what this task force is up to. Like, Republicans love this guy. They call him Leo 2.0. They even have hats that say Leo 2.0 to symbolize, nod to his transformation from Democrat to Trump supporter. From what I can tell by his X feed, he spends a lot of time tweeting and posting and reposting all throughout the day. He'll have just periodically, I hate DEI, or he'll say somebody is a DEI hire, or he'll warn, we're coming for you, Harvard. Like, he's just out there very aggressively online. And I should also say that he himself has echoed anti-Semitic comments, which is one of the things I think is important when we're talking about this administration's approach to anti-Semitism. There are a lot of critics who say that if Terrell was really worried about anti-Semitism, that he and also, in fact, President Trump wouldn't be promoting anti-Semitic ideas or echoing people who are known anti-Semites. For instance, he retweeted a tweet from a guy who is a white supremacist who said that Trump should revoke Senator Chuck Schumer's, quote, Jew card, unquote, because of his views about the conflict in Israel. The idea that somebody has a Jew card that can be revoked by the government is not your everyday kind of pro-Jewish thought. And of course, President Trump himself has a history of associating with white supremacists, saying things that are viewed as anti-Semitic. Just recently, he made a comment about bankers that was seen as anti-Semitic. He had dinner with Nick Fuentes, who is a known anti-Semite. So there are people out there who are saying, like, what's really going on here? Another important person is Harmeet Dillon. She's the head of the Civil Rights Division at the Justice Department, and she really is involved with the investigations. Here she is speaking at a Justice Department event with the Union of Orthodox Jewish Congregations in May.
The task force represents an all-of-government approach to eradicating anti-Semitism. It is this administration's commitment to use the entire array of tools available to the executive branch to address the scourge of anti-Semitism experiencing a horrific resurgence in this country.
She also has said some controversial things, at least in private. We talked with some people who were with her at a White House meeting. As it happens, this meeting took place in June, right after this brutal attack in Boulder, Colorado, where demonstrators on behalf of the hostages in Gaza were attacked. And she was talking about that.
These were Jewish protesters on behalf of Israeli hostages.
Exactly. And so this was clearly an act of anti-Semitism. Right. And so she's talking to people about the anti-Semitism task force, and you would think that she would sort of like zero in on like the core issues of anti-Semitism there, or at least that's what some of the Jewish leaders who attended this felt like. But in fact, she said this whole incident showed why Americans needed expanded gun rights, which was puzzling to some. And she also compared the people who were guilty of anti-Semitism to people involved in other liberal causes like Black Lives Matter, Occupy Wall Street, Antifa. Now, these are all sort of movements that most people do not really think of when they think of anti-Semitism. But, she connected them up, saying these are like all ideologically aligned with Marxism. So this is sort of just another example of taking these liberal movements and connecting them up with anti-Semites. And if you do that, if you're able to make that connection, then it makes more sense why, when you go after universities, you would be trying to get them to stop DEI and force them to have conservatives on their faculty and say that that's all part of the same thing.
So, Laura, hearing all of this, the one thing I'm thinking, Judaism, Jewish people, this is not a monolith, right? Everyone's not going to have like the exact same opinion of all of these issues. But when you're talking to Jewish leaders, when you're talking to other Jewish people, I mean, how do they feel about the fact that the administration has created this anti-Semitism task force and has taken on anti-Semitism as a cause?
Yeah, it's definitely not a monolith when it comes to this. There has been a range of reactions. Some people are just really grateful for the fact that the administration is like taking this issue on in a real way. And they point out that there has been real anti-Semitism on universities. There have been like physical attacks. There have been, spray paint, target symbols, death threats. There's survey data that shows that like about 1 in 3 Jewish college students in recent years has reported experiencing at least one episode of anti-Semitism personally. So there are some Jews who look at this whole task force and are like, this is very welcome. Other Jews respond to this that they're sort of offended by the idea that they're using anti-Semitism as a pretext, they would say, to go after other things that they actually support and that many Jews do support. So that they're actually quite offended by this. And some, in fact, go even further to say that this could make it even worse for Jews because they'll be seen as the reason why DEI got shut down. And that could be dangerous, in fact, for Jewish students. So there is a wide range of responses to this.
So, Laura, you said you've talked to the administration about this. How have they responded to the critique that this task force is it's just a vehicle for their conservative agenda?
Well, in many ways, many of the administration officials that we talked to didn't really push back on any of this. They said that, yeah, we're concerned about anti-Semitism and we're concerned about DEI, and we're going after both of them. The White House spokesperson who officially commented for the story did say that he is sort of offended by the idea that it's outrageous to suggest that the administration is weaponizing the fight against anti-Semitism to implement an alternate agenda. But both he and everyone else that we really talked to essentially said that there's nothing wrong with putting these issues together, that they're all a problem.
After the break, the task force's latest fight and the precedent it could set for free speech at universities. We'll be right back. So, Laura, this anti-Semitism task force, it's actually in the news this week because of its months-long conflict with Harvard. You mentioned earlier that Harvard has kind of been at the center of all of this. And now Harvard, the federal government, they're in court. How did they end up there? What's been going on?
So this fight between the administration and Harvard really intensified in April when the task force sent a letter to Harvard alleging the school had not been in compliance with civil rights law, specifically failing to keep Jewish students safe and free from discrimination as the law requires. And the letter just included this litany of demands, many of which had nothing to do with anti-Semitism. Among them, it demanded that Harvard stop racial hiring and admissions preferences. It's not entirely clear that they actually are giving racial hiring and admissions preferences, but they demanded that they stop all DEI initiatives, that they conduct an audit to assure that there was, quote, viewpoint diversity, like across the whole university, in the student body, in the faculty, staff, leadership. I mean, I don't even know how you audit viewpoint diversity in the student body, as well as in every department, field, and teaching unit. So this was just a sweeping demand. Now, Harvard did make some changes. They renamed their Office of Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion. It's now just called the Community and Campus Life Office. There also are ongoing talks going on about opening some sort of a pluralism hub, which was actually in the works before the Trump administration sent its letter to Harvard, even before the Trump administration took office. But that essentially seems to be a way to be welcoming more conservative viewpoints on campus and an acknowledgement that, viewpoint diversity is important in a place where you're supposed to be challenging yourself to consider new ideas. But still, this was still a really sweeping demand letter, and Harvard essentially said no, it would not do the things in that letter. And then within hours, the Trump administration froze Harvard's federal funding. And then after that, Harvard responded with a lawsuit. So there's this lawsuit pending that says that you cannot pull federal funding, that this is just patently illegal, that you're trying to essentially control a private nonprofit organization, which is the university. They're saying that you're trying to control what we're doing. You're essentially trying to chill us from expressing a liberal point of view. And also they allege that they didn't go through any of the procedures that they're supposed to go through in doing this.
And what is the government supposed to do?
Well, the law actually lays it out, a number of steps you're supposed to take. For starters, you have to actually have an investigation, which there's no sign there was any real investigation, which involves interviewing people, like actually asking a diverse group of people what happened. Then you're supposed to try to come to a resolution with the university, like say, hey, can you agree to stop doing these bad things that we found? And then if the university refuses to agree, you can't come to an agreement, then you can go to a court and you can say, okay, they won't comply, we want to pull their federal funding, and then the judge can order that the funding be halted. Now, guess how many of those steps happened?
I was going to say, did they do any of that?
They didn't do any of those things. So this is all in the lawsuit.
But the government, as we've discussed, is making this about anti-Semitism. What do they argue the legal grounds are for taking away, say, cancer research money on the grounds of anti-Semitism?
Well, first of all, you are not entitled to federal funding for anything, including cancer research, if you are in violation of civil rights law. So that's the first thing. But they actually don't make that argument in court. The argument they're making is not actually that they're violating Title VI of the Civil Rights Act, which bars discrimination on the basis of national origin, including shared Jewish ancestry. What they actually are arguing is that it's a contract dispute, that they're allowed to have their own priorities in their contracts. And in this case, their priority is they don't want to spend federal money on schools that are guilty of anti-Semitism. So now they're in federal court this week. There was a hearing on Monday in Boston. The issue is before Judge Allison Burroughs, and it will be up to her to decide whether to grant summary judgment to either party, which essentially would mean a victory without a trial, just based on what the legal arguments are. I think it's fair to say that no matter which way it goes, it will be appealed and likely all the way up to the Supreme Court. So we're going to wait a little while for this first decision in summary judgment, and then we'll see how it develops after that.
So we've got them in court this week. I mean, what are the longer term implications of whatever this decision is, like in terms of First Amendment protections, and then as well as kind of the future and the power of this anti-Semitism task force?
I mean, all of higher education is watching this suit. Everybody is watching to see what's going to happen here, to see whether the administration is going to have the power to essentially pull federal funding when they don't like what you're doing. And if they're allowed to do that, then this is just a very big stick that they're wielding, and that they'll start going to many other universities and doing the same thing, essentially trying to bring higher education writ large to heel. I mean, DEI has spread across many universities. This was a big initiative in the last decade as universities were trying to be more welcoming to all sorts of different groups. We've already seen rollbacks on that. We've seen DEI office names change. We've seen these statements stripped from websites. We've seen policies that required faculty applying for jobs to explain how they would contribute to diversity, those statements no longer being required. We've seen a lot of things already changing, but there could be even more. If Harvard loses this case, it will show that the administration just has enormous power.
Laura, thank you so much for coming on and explaining all this. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Laura Meckler is a national education reporter for The Post. The Trump administration continues this week to target universities. The State Department announced today that they are opening a new investigation into whether Harvard has considered national security risks when approving faculty and student international visas, though they did not provide any evidence of this. A university spokesperson said, quote, "This investigation is yet another retaliatory step taken by the administration in violation of Harvard's First Amendment rights." Also this week, Columbia University announced it would be suspending or expelling dozens of the students who participated in a protest against Israel's actions in Gaza. This comes as Columbia is in talks with the administration to unfreeze $400 million of federal funding, which the government froze because it said Columbia hasn't done enough to combat anti-Semitism. That's it for Post Reports. Thanks for listening. If you're looking for the latest updates on the big news of the day, check out our morning news briefing, The 7. We bring you the 7 stories you need to know about every weekday morning by 7 a.m. You can listen to it wherever you listen to podcasts. Today's show was produced by Sabby Robinson with help from Thomas Liu. It was mixed by Sean Carter and edited by Ariel Plotnick. Thanks to Chastity Pratt. I'm Colby Ickowitz. We'll be back tomorrow with more stories from The Washington Post.